Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time today to spend a whole Saturday working on reimagining Butler County. I'm Paul Scanlon from Slippery Rock University, Director of Sustainability out there, and I've been asked to kind of be the master of ceremonies today and introduce the speakers. We have about 6 speakers. We've limited our time to about 15 minutes each so that we can get through this and leave plenty of time for lunch when you can visit the different exhibitors and get more details from them. And then we'll go into the visioning tables where we have facilitators who will help you work through the process. So why reimagine Butler County? To me, it's all about our children. And with the fact that we need to consider both the adverse impacts of climate change and some of the opportunities presented by new technology. And that's what I'll be talking about. I'm going to try to touch on every topic, and then our following speakers are experts in their field. These are people who have actually done sustainable development and successfully, and so they'll get into more of the details as it applies to Butler County. So before we start, some of the basics. Who is Reimagine Butler County? It's really just a group of concerned citizens. We provide public forums like this one to stimulate community action and plan for a more sustainable future. We're going to use the results of these efforts to make policy recommendations to local government officials. And we use the information we gain at these things to help guide our personal and business decisions. So the common definition of sustainable development comes from the Brundtland Commission years ago. It's really development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. How do we know something is sustainable? Well, we use the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. To be sustainable, it has to be socially just. You got to pay a living wage, et cetera. For the planet, is it good for our environment? And profit, is it economically sustainable? It's got to be economically sustainable, whether you're talking about direct monetary profits or addressing some of the indirect social costs that we wind up, you don't pay in your utility bills, but as taxpayers, we wind up paying for environmental cleanups and things like that and health problems. So what's going on after today? We're going to post today's results and the video being filmed today on our website, Reimagine Butler County. We're going to be holding additional sessions like this in the future or working meetings to kind of refine our results and recommendations. We're going to try to collaborate with some of the adjacent counties. Beaver County and Indiana County are both going through a similar process. So it'd be great to compare notes and kind of look at what's happening regionally, not just in our county. And then eventually we'll submit our final recommendations to appropriate planning agencies. So you can be a big help, of course. At the end of today, we have an evaluation survey we'd like you to complete. And if you're interested in staying involved, just leave your contact information there and we'll stay in touch with you. So I'm going to be talking about climate reality, some of the threats and opportunities it offers to Butler County, some of the solutions we've seen in our research, positive trends in the energy and technology fields, and talk about long-term planning considerations as we move forward. So why is sustainability important? Again, it's to leave adequate resources for future generations. And in light of that, I'd like to introduce you to Vivian Blair Scanlon, my grandchild. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what she can expect in her lifetime. When I give these presentations to our students at Slip Rock, I always start off with the rule of 70. I hate math, even though I'm an engineer. It's a real simple equation. We tend to underestimate the impact of annual escalation rates here. But if you use the rule of 70, for any item that has an annual escalation rate, you divide that percentage escalation rate into the number 70, and that tells you how many years it takes for that item to double. So you can use that to see how population and consumption can drive future energy and resource demands. Last I looked, the global population growth was 1.2%. And to me, so what? That's not much. Well, the rule of 70 tells us that the population will double during Vivian's lifetime. So we'll be going from, I think, 7 billion to 14 billion people in the next generation. And that's going to drive a lot of demand. So, wait, who's going to feed, shelter, and clothe all those people? How long can we really count on fossil fuels? I've seen commercials years ago, a few years ago, where they talk about the shale gas can power the U.S. for the next 100 years at current consumption rates, and that's the qualifier, because current consumption rates doesn't include the impact of a growing population, growing economy that all requires energy. It also didn't include the impact of gas used for our power generation plants, because back then they weren't using that much. It doesn't include the gas used in transportation. Now we're going to compressed natural gas vehicle fleets. And it didn't include the fact that we're now exporting a lot of our gas. A lot of the Marcellus gas produced in this region is now being exported to the highest bidder in Asia. So it's good that we have it. We need it to transition because you can't shut down all the coal plants overnight if you want lights to come on. But it's a finite resource and it's not going to last forever. So how can we preserve our natural resources and make Butler County attractive to Vivian's generation? We need to keep our young people here to build a better future. I've done a lot of research in climate change. There's studies out the wazoo. They're still going on, but studies are one thing, observations are quite another. We can literally see it happening in front of our eyes. This chart shows the number of extreme weather events from 1980 to 2016. Quite a upward trend there. The yellow is storms, the blue is floods, and the red is extreme temperature, droughts, and wildfire. And just the number of those events is really increasing. Some of the impacts we should be expecting: warmer summers, we're already seeing that. I think something like 19 of the hottest summers or hottest years on record have occurred since about the year 2000. Last year probably be joining that. Extreme heat in Kuwait and the Mideast, temperatures have gotten as high as 129 degrees Fahrenheit. People can't survive in that temperature for more than a couple of hours. And that's why you're seeing climate refugees and some of the political instability happening. Droughts and increasing intensity and length of wildfires. Fortunately, that's not going to affect us too much. You know, our droughts tend to be shorter and not as intense, but out west in the Midwest, it's having a big impact. What we're seeing is more intense storms and flooding. Not as bad as the rest of the world, but it's getting worse every year. And all these things are affecting food production and leading to more tropical and infectious diseases. The more hot and humid our climate becomes, the more it's a good environment for these mosquitoes and things like that carry the diseases. So here in Pennsylvania, some of the impacts on agriculture, and T. Lyle will be talking about some of these things. He's been living this for many years. Water stress on our agricultural industry, heat stress in the animals, the crops, and humans. Late summer flowering fruits and grains will be impacted adversely. And the invasive plants, pests, and disease as our climate becomes more like Alabama, the invasive species, the insects and things that they see are moving up to our region. And that could lead to increased chemical use to combat invasive species and things like that. One study has shown that by the end of the century, Pennsylvania's dairy production could drop by 25% just due to heat stress in the animals. This is a chart showing the number of heavy rainfalls in Pennsylvania. Obviously, it's from 1950 to 2020, so this is our lifetimes. Obviously, it's got an upward trajectory. That's the number of rainfalls. And the intensity of rainfalls is increasing. Last year, we had rainfalls of 3 to 5 inches in a day or two. My engineering company, I'm working in Puerto Rico, and the The design is no longer a 5-inch per hour rainfall intensity. The insurance companies are now requiring the upgrade to 10 inches per hour rainfall. That's just hard to believe. Here in Pittsburgh, our mosquito season has grown by 1/3. And if you look at this chart, the red at the bottom is the region where the mosquito that carries the Zika virus likes. And you can see it's bordering on our area right now. So, as Vivian reads her morning newspaper, she's saying, "Come on, Grandpa, don't you have any good news?" Well, yes, we do, actually. I'm an architectural engineer. I spent most of my career in energy efficiency and conservation, and it's a big trend here. At Slippery Rock, we've improved our campus energy efficiency by 40% since 2005 when we started tracking it. The industry is great. If you want to do something for the environment, you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in conservation in your buildings. It's got the best return on investment of about anything you can do. And you can't outsource it to China. We can't move our buildings to China. It takes local labor, and these days a lot of local or US-made products. So that's one area that's increasing and being a big help in reducing our climate change impacts. Wind power, this chart is showing, it's in euros. I'm not going to try to interpret that for you. But it's showing the impact of mass production. The more megawatts are deployed, the lower the cost comes. So the cost is dropping dramatically for wind power. Solar photovoltaics is the same way. This is from 1976. It was at $79 per watt to last year, or the year before, it was 41 cents per watt. So the actual cost of the materials has declined rapidly while the efficiency keeps increasing. And so, of course, that's leading to a positive trajectory for solar systems. This chart is by Lazard Management Consulting. It's an independent commercial business. It's not associated with the government or anything. They looked at the levelized cost of electricity from 2009 to 2017. The levelized cost takes the first cost and all the operating and maintenance costs and fuel costs over the life of the plant, divided by the amount of electricity it produces over that lifetime. The blue chart is the blue line is wind power. You can see it's gone from $135 per megawatt hour down to $45. That's a tremendous gain. Photovoltaics is even more impressive. It's gone from $350 per megawatt hour down to $50. Third is natural gas. Partly because we're overproducing and the price is so depressed. But again, that's not going to last forever. Coal is no longer competitive at all. More than half of our coal plants in the country are 50, 60 years old that they cannot be renovated to come up to current pollution standards. And nuclear is in trouble too. The cost per megawatt hour is just going through the roof. So that shows why there's a big trend toward renewable energy. If you look at the year 2016, the new electric generation capacity in the United States, over 70% is from renewable energy. Only 25% is from the new natural gas. This kind of shows you why. On the left-hand side, you look at a conventional coal-fired power plant. You got to have material handling systems that pull that coal into the plant, burn it in a boiler, create steam. The steam runs a turbine. The turbine runs a generator. It goes to a There are kinetic and thermal losses every step of the way. So when you flip that light switch, you're getting about 1/3 of the energy that goes into that plant. That's how inefficient these plants are. And of course, their fuel costs will continue to escalate because it's a finite resource. Some of these pictures below are either coal or nuclear plants, but these central plants are like small cities. There's so much equipment, so many buildings, they have so many operators to maintain, repair the systems. So their long-term costs continue to go up. On the right-hand side, look at the renewable systems. On photovoltaics, I don't see a single moving part. There's no repairs and maintenance or very little required. You're not paying for fuel costs once you get that installed. And it's more distributed, so it's more secure from things like cyber attacks and power outages. So I think that shows a trend why we're going more renewable, and it's going to be a trend for the foreseeable future. Some more good news, battery costs. These are the cost of batteries used in electric vehicles, continues to drop. This chart is showing that within 5 years, they're projecting that the powertrain for cars, engine, transmission, will be at cost parity with conventional cars. And the trajectory, the blue trajectory from the left going downward is the electric car powertrain cost. It continues to go down. And just like solar photovoltaics, an electric car, you don't have an internal combustion engine and a carburetor and a radiator and all these gadgets and moving parts that you have to repair and maintain. Electric cars have very few moving parts, and therefore they're going to cost less to maintain for their entire life. The markets are now driving the auto industry. If you look at this, these are the countries that are planning to phase out fossil fuel cars entirely. India and China are by far the largest consumers of new cars, and it's going to continue that way. When they tell the auto industry that they're not going to accept fossil fuel cars, you better believe the auto industry is going to listen to them. And there's an auto manufacturer on this chart I never heard of, but these are all manufacturers that now have electric products in production. So in my mind, I'm seeing a great movement to electric vehicles, and in 20, 30 years or so, that electricity is going to be almost all renewable. So we could solve the transportation pollution problems along with the electrical production issues. So what assets and resources do we have in the Butler County? Easy access to the major population centers. A huge portion of the U.S. population is in the Northeast. We have skilled manufacturing and agricultural workforces. Maybe not enough of them, but we have them. Colleges and the universities are very strong on. A lot of great healthcare centers. Abundance of farmland with sustainable supplies of water if we protect them. Lots of reasonably priced land for larger utility scale solar systems and other new uses, and then low housing and living costs. So we have a lot of things going for us. Nancy, where's Nancy? Nancy Adams is an immigrant. She is from Minnesota. She's been involved in an amazing amount of economic development, agricultural development, and you had a farm, I believe? Yeah. Her table, we call it Butler County Through Fresh Eyes. She's done an amazing job of pulling together statistics and information about the resources in this area over at the table there. So at lunchtime, when you have a chance, go over there and welcome to our community. She's already a big asset. So in my mind, Butler County, in this area, we're one of the safest places in the world when it comes to what's going to happen with climate change. We don't tend to have the droughts. The Mideast has had a drought for 14 years. I have an image from an Al Gore presentation showing an Arab guy in his tent standing in front of a desert, and he's saying, I used to have 400 acres of wheat fields, and now I have 400 acres of desert. And that's creating some of the climate refugees, the food refugees, and political instability. I forget how many millions of people in Syria gave up their farms and moved into the inner cities. And we all know how that turned out. So there is a lot of instability being caused, but we're very safe here. We don't have the hurricanes, the number of them, the intensity. We don't have to worry about storm surges like the coast does. So that's a pretty good talking point for Butler County. We have better water quality and air quality than a lot of areas. A lot of natural resources, recreational areas, the state parks, all the trails and skiing, strong local food networks, they're getting stronger. And an increasing interest in sustainable agriculture, tourism, and ecotourism. And of course, hunting, camping, fishing, that sort of thing. What should we expect going forward? Expect increasing frequency and intensity of storms. We've got to solve that problem. Some of the adverse impacts, flooding victims, waterborne diseases, power outages, a lot of economic losses. Expect more power outages, whether it's from storms or cyber attacks, creating economic losses. It's going to increase our electrical costs. The electrical local companies are investing more and more in their transmission lines to protect against storm outages and cyber attacks. Residential food storage, you have a power outage, how much food are we going to lose? People that rely on electricity for medical devices are going to need backup power. And expect the gas and oil industry to eventually move on. I mean, it's always been a cyclical industry. You overproduce, the price drops, you slow down. You underproduce, the price goes up, they drill more. But eventually they move on. That's the history. And so we should be thinking about that. Are we going to have stranded assets? Are people building extra hotels and motels for these folks? What's going to happen to them in the future? If they follow the trend of the coal industry, they declare bankruptcy and they move on, and taxpayers wind up cleaning for the environmental or paying for the cleanups of the environment. So we have to think about that. The droughts, wildfires in the Midwest, food shortages, less outside recreation, not in our area, but out in the West and Midwest. Extreme heat will continue. That's going to affect agricultural production. It's going to stress the electrical grid with all the air conditioning. You know, Monday afternoon, 4 or 5, everybody comes home from work, hits their air conditioning and stresses the electrical grid. So the visioning process challenge, how do we mitigate these impacts and build a more resilient community? So here's just some random thoughts about long-term planning. If food production from the Midwest and the West declines, is that an opportunity for PA agriculture? Whether it's producing more food locally for ourselves or actually exporting food, who knows? I'm hoping T. Lyle can talk about that. Can we fill the agriculture and manufacturing labor shortages by creating sister communities? Whether it's an immigrant from a developing country that knows how to do sustainable agriculture because they had to survive. What about flood refugees from New Orleans? There are people that left New Orleans and never returned. There are people, if we need labor, they're available. We just have to have a supporting community and maybe get to know those resources before we bring them here. What about the Midwest and West, all the outdoor recreational opportunities? I wouldn't go out west this summer because of all the wildfires to take advantage of that. Well, maybe we can make that an opportunity for us and build up our ecotourism industry. Easy access to major population centers. We could have less expensive, shorter trips for people to come and enjoy the state parks and other resources. If the extreme heat threatens the old and young alike, maybe we should do something with all these shopping malls that are going bankrupt and the elementary schools that have been closed. Could they be a multi-generational community center? They have air conditioning for people, elderly, that don't have air conditioning in their homes. Community gardens where the young and the old can enjoy and learn from each other and enjoy each other. If intense storms create flooding and waterway pollution, should we expand the conservation easement programs to preserve more green space in Butler County? I apply for that every year on my property. I ranked like 19 out of 20 last year, but they can only fund about 2 properties a year to set aside forever as green space. We need to get more money into that program so we can preserve more green space. Minimum code requirements for stormwater management systems. I mentioned what's happening in Puerto Rico. We can no longer rely on minimum code requirements to say the 100-year history is a certain amount of rainfall per hour. We need to anticipate what's coming and design above code. If the gas and oil industries experience more bankruptcies or eventually move on, do we have money set aside to address future cleanups? Do we have adequate DEP staff to inspect and enforce? the whole electric vehicle, renewable energy, and the sharing economy, those are all kind of revolutions happening right now. How do we retrain our labor force for new jobs in the green industry? There will be a lot less repairs on combustion engines and more on electric vehicles. There's a lot of new green industries, and we have a speaker talking about that later on. What do we do with all the internal combustion engines that eventually will become obsolete? I think in our cities, we're going to find a lot of unneeded parking lots and parking garages. What do we do with them? Because the sharing economy and mass transportation hopefully reduces the number of single occupant vehicle use. Okay, I have less than a minute here, so I'm going to conclude. Thank you for your interest, your support, and the ideas that can help us prepare for a more sustainable future. The link at the bottom is it's an article, actually a training handbook on resiliency planning for communities from the Post-Carbon Institute. And the last line I want to emphasize, in a human community, identity is essentially determined by what people value about where they live. Therefore, the people who inhabit a community must be at the heart of the resilience building process. I've seen research that took a homogeneous group of experts in an industry with similar backgrounds, and then they looked at groups, a diverse group, various backgrounds, various levels of intellect. And what the research shows is that the diverse groups make better decisions than the group of experts. And that's why the more diversity we have here with backgrounds and information, the better off we'll be. So, thanks for everything you're going to do. And just remember, we got to think long term, not 5 years, not 10 years, 20, 50 years. Okay. Thank you.